Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our January 16th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and this week's episode features an introduction to Iowa Farm Bureau's priorities for the 2023 state legislative session, as well as the story of Jason Brown. Jason's a former professional football star, at one point the highest paid center in the NFL, who walked away from millions of dollars to farm and feed his local community. Oh, and by the way, Jason didn't grow up on a farm or study agriculture in school, so his move to agriculture was a true leap of faith. So what drives someone to make a life-altering move like that? Jason's going to share that with us later on in this episode. But first up, we have Kevin Kuhle, who's a state policy advisor for the Iowa Farm Bureau. A new year means the beginning of a new state legislative session, and Kevin's here to talk about Farm Bureau members' priorities in 2023, like taxpayer and landowner protections, addressing Iowa's veterinarian shortage, and more. Kevin and Spokesman editor Tom Block met up near the end of December to discuss Farm Bureau's priorities for the 2023 legislative session.
Kevin, let's start with a look at the state's fiscal 2024 budget, which will be debated this session. What will Farm Bureau be focusing on as lawmakers work through the budgeting process?
Well, thanks a lot, Tom. Appreciate the opportunity to give a little preview of the upcoming legislative session. From January 9th until middle of April, that's the scheduled time for the session. Sometimes it runs longer, sometimes it's a little bit shorter, but this upcoming year, they're going to set the budget for the 2024 fiscal year. The previous fiscal year's budget was around $8.2 billion of general fund appropriations, and the state is expected to have additional revenue this year of $9 billion, in excess of $9 billion in revenue. So the state has a healthy, growing budget, even as tax cuts are phased in from the tax reform law that was passed in the 2022 legislative session. Farm Bureau members are going to be interested in continuing funding for those key priorities for the state that are important to agriculture. We want to continue funding for the water quality initiatives and the commitment with Senate File 512 for the programs that farmers are using to put conservation practices on the ground. Additionally, new funding for updating the nitrogen recommendation tool at Iowa State University, the MRTN calculator, wanting to continue that funding for that program. Additionally, protecting funding for foreign animal disease prevention and preparedness, for small-scale butchery cost-share grants. And those are just a few of some of the line items that Farm Bureau members will be looking at for this upcoming session and wanting the legislature to continue. Our overarching goal for the state budget is to ensure that the state doesn't shift their obligations onto the backs of property taxpayers. Now, the state doesn't set local levy rates for property taxes, but they make many decisions that impact property taxpayers. One success story that Farm Bureau can point to with the support of the legislature and the governor's office is eliminating the mental health property tax levy and shifting those expenses onto the state budget. This was an example of the legislature removing a people service off the property tax rolls and putting them into the general fund appropriation. That provided property tax relief to local governments and to every property taxpayer in the state. Ultimately, our goal for property taxes is that they should fund critical property-related services and not cover those people services. So we encourage the legislature to continue looking for opportunities to provide property tax relief in the upcoming session. And that'll be kind of our main focus when it comes to the state's budget for this upcoming fiscal year.
Another focus for Farm Bureau will be enhancing protections for landowners affected by construction of large infrastructure projects such as underground pipelines and electric transmission lines. What additional protections are Farm Bureau members seeking, and how will they benefit landowners?
Well, as you know, this is a very important topic right now, very timely topic. And Farm Bureau members, through our grassroots policy development process over the past year, looked at the process for the state citing these large infrastructure projects, whether they be pipelines or electrical transmission lines. And Farm Bureau members looked at this process, and they looked for gaps in that process and how we can better protect landowners prior to approval and after these projects are installed. And so Farm Bureau members decided on three main areas where there needs to be improvements in this process. And they fall into three categories: the use of eminent domain, the land restoration standards that are being used after a project is complete, and then ensuring a farmer is compensated for any crop yield reductions on the land. So the ultimate goal for this upcoming session when it comes to these types of projects and the process that's involved is ensuring that Iowa law adequately protects landowners' rights prior to approval and after construction is complete. And so focusing on those three areas, Farm Bureau members would like to see a minimum of a 90% voluntary easement threshold before a large infrastructure project is granted eminent domain authority. Farmers should have additional ability to file land restoration standard complaints directly with the Utilities Board to ensure that they can get those issues addressed. And then additionally, farmers should be made whole for continued crop yield losses. They should have the opportunity to renegotiate with companies, not limited by the number of years or how long ago that pipeline was installed. So that's going to be our focus for the upcoming legislative session. This is a critically important issue that we believe needs to be addressed this upcoming session. And Farm Bureau members are going to communicate their stories about why this is so important to them, why landowner rights is such a critically important thing that all legislators should care about. And we're hoping to see some changes and improvements in the process this upcoming legislative session.
Kevin, we know livestock is a vital part of Iowa's economy, but accessing veterinarian services in rural areas has become challenging due to shortages of veterinarians, especially food animal veterinarians. How can the legislature address the issue to increase the availability of veterinary care to support livestock farmers, protect food safety, and enhance disease protection?
This is a critically important issue, and the legislature has taken some steps to address veterinary shortages. Previous legislative session, at the urging of Farm Bureau members across the state, the legislature approved a loan repayment program to help out those vets and encourage them to practice in designated shortage areas. This was a interesting process. It was a project that the legislature approved and is funding annually now, and we're seeing the benefits of that. But that isn't the silver bullet to solving this issue. And what Farm Bureau members identified is hoping to make a policy change to expand the scope of practices that registered veterinary technicians can practice under the indirect supervision of their licensed vet. And so if you think about optimizing each of those individuals' time, a vet tech could go out and do some simple practices that they are trained to do while the other vet is taking care of another client. And so this is a way to optimize, create efficiencies to provide more care out there in the countryside. When we see a shortage of vets, we see an aging population of vets across the state. So we're going to continue to look for ways in which we can expand care in those rural areas. And this is one way in which we believe we can do that. And we're hoping the legislature can approve that change in this upcoming session.
Wildlife management by the state is another issue that was discussed by Farm Bureau members in recent policy sessions. In addition to deer damage, many more farmers are reporting damage from surging raccoon populations, which have tripled since 2006, according to a DNR survey. What's the scope of the problem, and what are Farm Bureau's key wildlife management priorities for 2023?
I'm sure every farmer has a story about raccoons causing damage on their farm and what a nuisance that they are. And populations are surging, and harvest rates are at some of their lowest levels in quite some time. A recent study out of Purdue University Extension showed that around 87% of damage to corn crop caused by wildlife is actually at the hands of raccoons. So we see it's an issue. Right now we've got a raccoon hunting season in the state. We also have the ability to trap raccoons or to control raccoons for nuisance control after getting the DNR permission and going through that extra level of step. Our members would like enhanced tools to be able to control the raccoon population in the state, allow year-round hunting, trapping without restrictions to control those nuisance creatures and protect their crops. So we're hoping that we can make that change in the upcoming session.
Kevin, these months during the legislative session will always be important. Why is it important for Farm Bureau members to engage with their legislators, not only during the legislative session, but also throughout the year?
You know, it's interesting. The state of Iowa, we have a very functioning government. The legislature every year is going to pass a budget. They're going to pass policy bills. It's a little bit different than D.C., where things move very slowly. In Iowa, when they go out to the Capitol in Des Moines, they're going to pass policy bills. They're going to pass a budget. And that's why it's critically important for farmers to have their voices heard, to speak to their legislators. And Farm Bureau gives you a lot of opportunities to do that, whether participating in our Farm Bureau days at the Capitol, engaging with legislators through conference calls with town hall meetings back home in the district. Those are all critical steps that farmers should take to ensure that their voice is heard. If farmers aren't speaking up and speaking for their interests, their voices won't be heard in the legislature. So it's critically important that farmers are telling their story, communicating with their legislators, ensuring that their voice is heard, and how these policies impact them in the real world, impact their operations and their communities. Farm Bureau members do it better than most. They know how to effectively communicate with their legislators, and that's why Farm Bureau has been successful in the legislature and will continue to be successful into future years.
I hope you heard Kevin's takeaway message there. Farm Bureau's strong advocacy at the State House starts with farmers who are willing to share their stories to create a brighter future for ag and our entire state. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, we'd encourage you to contact your county Farm Bureau to join the united grassroots voice of Iowa agriculture. Next up is former NFL star and current farmer Jason Brown. When Jason walked away from his lucrative NFL career back in 2012 and decided to start a farm that would help feed his community, it caught the entire country's attention. Last month, Jason was the keynote speaker at our annual meeting, where he had a chance to share why he made the move to farming and what he's experienced since his family started First Fruits Farm a decade ago. Spokesman reporter Corey Munson caught up with Jason before that keynote address.
So on a high level, I think a lot of us know your story. You were a successful NFL player who walked away from the sport to farm full-time. Can you give our listeners kind of an overview of your journey from the football field to the farm field?
This is really a story of faith. It definitely was a leap of faith. This is something that I was not prepared for. This is not something I went to school for. I'm an interpersonal communications major. So when I speak, with the Farm Bureau family, I'm going to be right comfortable at home. But on a farm, that is something that pulls me a little bit outside of my comfort zone. But everyone is familiar with, the awesome speech by Paul Harvey, 1978, So God Made a Farmer. That is the miraculous story. God made a farmer out of Jason Brown.
Do you think there's any specific experience or a realization that you came to that really led you to leave that football career behind?
So I've been inspired by so many awesome people in my life. One mainly, my older brother that dedicated his life to service. He served our country in the Army. He was Army intelligence, and he was stationed in Iraq and Afghanistan. And unfortunately, he paid the ultimate price. And he was slain in service September 20th of 2003. And that really caused me to look more at service and sacrifice, giving back in a very unique way. And so when I asked God, with all of the gifts, the talents, with all of the blessings that you've given me, what would you have me to do more so than anything else to give back to our local communities and to make a difference? And he pointed me towards agriculture, towards farming and just simply feeding folks. It really is, at its core, something that everybody needs. Food is the great equilibrium. It's the greatest constant. But also, it is something that everyone really, loves good food. And so it helps me to be able to make a difference in a very unique way, but it's also a very practical way.
I think this would be a great opportunity for you to kind of fill us in on what you grow and how you grow it.
Yes, so we naturally gravitated towards sweet potatoes. North Carolina is the sweet potato capital of the world. That is our state vegetable. The mighty muscadine grape, that is our state fruit. We grow both on First Fruits Farm. Our soil is just the right amount of sandy loam soil, closer to the coastal region where we can grow sweet potatoes very well. And that has been one of our staple crops over the years. But since our inception, we have migrated over to a salad bowl, dish of a little bit of everything you can possibly think of, especially in the summertime. So, cucumbers, lettuce, tomatoes, squash, zucchini, watermelon, sweet corn, anything that you can harvest fresh out of the field and eat it that day, we try and grow it.
A big portion of what you do is charity focused and giving a lot of that food away. Can you tell us about that? What does that look like?
North Carolina, unfortunately, ranks very high in food insecurity. 1 in 5 children do not know where their next meal is going to come from. So although we're surrounded by farms, we're surrounded by farmers and agriculture, there's a lot of food deserts and food insecurity, rampant throughout our state. And so that gave us a tremendous opportunity to develop a food ministry in First Fruits Farm. And our initial goal was to give the first fruits of every harvest, kind of like a tithe and offering. But when we, really saw exactly how much need there was, and as much as we were growing, it really wasn't reaching that far. So many of the food banks, the soup kitchens, the local churches, they asked, hey, is there more? Can you do more? And God really placed it on our hearts to give away most of our harvest. And so to date, we have grown, harvested, and donated more than 1 million pounds of food, well over that. But right now, it's really not about the numbers for us. It's really about creating more accountability in our food system, and also knowing that I'm just Jason Brown, all right? I'm one man, I'm one farmer amongst so many thousands of awesome farmers around our country, and I'm really trying to focus on education and inspiring the next generation, all right, inspiring our youth to really take a good hard look at the opportunities that agriculture offers. Everyone is coming together to really help solve these issues.
Now let's back up just a little bit, and can you tell us kind of what the first few years of farming were like? I mean, did you hit the farm and no problem? It was just, work a couple days a week and take a nap, or how'd it go?
This is not learn as you go. This is learn as you grow, okay? And I've already shared that I did not go to school for this. I was not equipped, for this. No matter how much I can bench press and squat in the weight room, no matter how much I've beat up on the Pittsburgh Steelers or any one of your favorite teams, guess what? Getting on a farm field is totally different. Being put in front of a 1,500-pound bull, all right, hey, I can wrestle a 300-pound defensive lineman, but guess what? I'm not going to be persuading a big bull. And so I've had countless humbling, moments. But at the same time, so many things that I learned from sports, going through your seasons, licking your wounds and getting back out there. I have had tremendous successes and yeah, there's been times where I've utterly felt like a failure, but that's where the farm grit, comes in, knowing that, hey, repair your equipment, get back to the game plan in the off season and get back out there in the spring with optimism, knowing that, hey, you have another opportunity to sow some seeds in faith, looking forward to an awesome harvest.
On your farm specifically, you guys have expanded beyond just growing things to also include an event space as well as some agritourism. Do you want to kind of share a little bit about that side of the business?
Yeah. So a lot of people ask, hey, well, Jason, if you're growing and you're giving away most of what you grow, like how are you making ends meet? It really doesn't make sense until, yes, you look at the agritourism opportunities. We have an awesome dairy barn where we host about 40 weddings a year right now. Several other agritourism opportunities. We've hosted our second annual Memorial Balloon Festival, where we've had, tens of thousands of guests, people out in the community that are looking for something to do. COVID really had people indoors for the past, couple of years. And we said, you know what? First Fruits Farm can also be a safe space. It can be a place where we can get out there if we need to. Yeah, we can social distance. It's a very large farm, but a place where people can come together and have genuine family fellowship. And I tell you what, seeing the smiles on so many people's faces, I've had just as many people give me thanks and appreciation for helping to host the Balloon Festival as much as our food ministry. But guess what? Food and fellowship go hand in hand. It really helps, to bring people together.
So you're joining us this week for the Iowa Farm Bureau annual meeting. Is there a specific message or idea that you hope folks take away from your talk with them?
Look, I know I'm in the Midwest. I know that this is the heartbeat of America, all right? I've already heard awesome things about the state fair out here. And guess what? Yes, the agriculture that takes place, the farming that takes place out here in the Midwest is completely different. Where I am in North Carolina, I struggle to try and get people to visualize and understand just how important agriculture and farms are. But out here, it's a way of life, brother. Okay, you step right outside these city limits, and it's nothing but farmland out here, and it's rich, fertile soil, and so I really feel as though I'm amongst family when I'm out here, and that's one of my main focuses is to keep the focus on our farms and the families that they serve, the farm families that grow up on the farms, as well as the other families and the people in the communities that we serve. And yeah, not to sound so cliche, with the past couple of years in that, yeah, we're all in this together. All right. Now, I don't know how many times you've heard that before, but I just really love and appreciate how food and growing good food, brings people together. And I'm thankful to be able to, to share my passion. I'm getting a little bit older, but whatever celebrity, whatever fame, whatever I still have in this youthful body, I really want to encourage and inspire the youth as much as I possibly can, so that the age of the average farmer isn't 60, 65, pushing, that senior citizen age. But yes, we have an awesome youthful generation that's going to come along and say, hey, we're going to take the reins and we're going to do a good job.
Faith, family, fellowship, and farming. While Jason Brown's journey to agriculture is probably a lot different than yours or mine, I think we can all appreciate and relate to the purpose that has led him to farming. It's also a good reminder of the blessings we've received, the responsibility we have to care for our neighbors, and the overall importance of the work farmers and other agriculturalists do on a daily basis. That's all for this episode of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll join us for our next one on January 30th. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau. And thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.